Tana Mongeau really messed up during last week's episode of her canceled podcast, and I have a feeling people aren't gonna let her forget it. She also made a really dumb mistake and almost got the whole podcast canceled. It's a mess, so let's get into it. For the past 9 months, nearly every week, Tana and Brooke have posted an episode of their podcast called Cancelled. It's definitely the most consistent thing Tana has ever done, seeing as she's pretty much abandoned her main channel. With how long Tana's been doing this podcast for, you would think she would have done something by now to get people mad at her or get herself canceled again. Surprisingly though, nothing like that's happened, and I think it's because Brooke and Tana really balance each other out. Until last week. Tana and Brooke had to issue an apology last week for their previous episode with Stella Barry. If you guys saw the episode I'm talking about, you would know it was a complete disaster. During the episode with Stella, Tana and Brooke were really praising her and condoning the things that she was talking about. Stella talked about a whole bunch of really messed up things, and Tana and Brooke just sat by and clapped. The first thing Stella talked about was doing fans with her cousin.
Crazy. Your OnlyFans blew up because, and I could just say, I can say anything with you, right?
You can say anything, yeah.
You were your cousin, yeah?
The first collab with Hannah, I had my cousin.
Wait, so
I had
is
no
cousin
idea.
the loophole? Like, can you say cousin?
Everyone already knows we're cousins from TikTok and Twitter, that we don't even say anything about cousin, related, nothing on. You just tell the videos, Hannah and Stella.
So are you, that's so, I'm like speechless.
And with my type of business model, it's a real girl doing real things in her real life. So it's
Nothing
like
wrong with
you
that,
get
but
to, they get to see a real girl with her real cousin. Like actually.
And real, when you said every you have is real.
And Tana was living for it. Most people would be like, that's kind of messed up. But Tana and Brooke were sitting off to the side, calling her an inspiration to girls and saying that she's empowering women.
I think there's something so special about someone who just really doesn't give a
Yeah.
and like
No shame.
It's empowering. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even just with that, like that you just don't give a like I'm here to do whatever I want to do.
Tana just kept saying over and over again that she loves that she's being her authentic self and just doesn't care what anyone thinks. Now, it turns out the cousin Stella is talking about isn't actually her blood cousin. She only told Tana that like 10 minutes into the episode, after Tana totally condoned it actually being her cousin.
So were you cousins by marriage or no?
We're not blood related, and people always ask that. They think that we are. We're not.
Stella also talked about having a relationship with a man who was experiencing homelessness at the shelter she was working at.
You were saying that you were working in the homeless shelter, which first of all, again, like you're just such a good girl, like philanthropist vibes. Like I love that
vibes.
in more ways than one, actually. You know, but you were there and you met this guy and you were like, you're so hot.
It probably helped that like it was like so taboo. Like you're not supposed to do that.
You're not supposed to. It's like forbidden. And
but I mean, what more form
and, like,
of philanthropy
who could
can
be
you
more
really?
manly too than like a homeless
person.
Marine veteran?
I so agree with that.
As I'm sure you guys can probably guess, that's a huge no-no. These people seek out shelters because they're vulnerable, they need help, they need a place to sleep and eat where they feel safe. The fact that she went against her workplace policy and is just sitting there bragging about breaking the rules is so gross. To make it even worse, Tana and Brooke just laughed it off and acted like it was the best thing they've ever heard. Tana even said that she would probably do the same.
I would do the same exact thing.
Dude, it
Like,
took me.
Stella also talked about really unsafe practices when it comes to safe sex. At no point did Tana or Brooke stop her and say, that's not okay, or at least cut it out during editing. They just kept on going on and on about how she's such an icon to them. And that was only the first 20 minutes or so. This is an hour-long episode and it just kept getting worse and worse. So bad, I honestly can't even talk about half the stuff that was said. And just remember, this doesn't have anything to do with shaming Stella's line of work. This has to do with illegal behavior, breaking company policy, promoting unsafe things to young girls, and the list just goes on, and all the comments under this video are calling out exactly that. Well, that's going to be the last episode of this podcast that I'll ever watch. Making light of incest, violating workplace ethics as a counselor, unsafe sexual practices. This crossed the line even for Tana standards. You cannot say empowerment in the same sentence as talking about literal incest. Nurse practitioner here. Speaking for all healthcare professionals, please do not ingest your own and these behaviors are dangerous. The list of repercussions is long. This was so irresponsible and dangerous. This is actually terrifying that you posted this and had the nerve to talk about this being empowering. Can you guys even imagine if this was someone like Shane Dawson saying anything even remotely close to what was said on this podcast? He would be even more canceled than he is right now. Yet for some reason, Tana sits by, calls this girl her president, and she's still able to go on like normal with no real repercussions. They still posted an episode the following week, but titled it A Formal Apology from Us. And if you're actually expecting a formal apology from Tana, you're in for a disappointment. They posed for this really fake crying thumbnail, pretty much making a huge joke out of the whole situation, and then they went on to say this.
I'm so sorry.
Apology with tears now.
No, don't we like owe them an apology or something? Aren't they mad at us?
Oh my God. I completely
Yeah.
forgot about that. I mean, read the title. It happens.
Okay, so
we were not trying to normalize incest, and I'm sorry for laughing. That's just not a real
I
sentence.
do get how it came across that way.
So that's the big apology from Tana and Brooke. The funny thing is, Tana literally lied in her apology. She says going into the podcast that they knew it wasn't her actual real cousin.
First of all, Stella Barry's cousin is not her blood cousin.
Yes, and so we knew that going into the podcast that the cousin thing it's not a real cousin.
But that's not true. 10 minutes into the conversation, after Tana already hyped it up, Stella said, well, we're not blood related. And Tana was like, oh, really?
We're not blood related. And people
Really?
So yeah. In other news, the canceled podcast actually almost came to an end last week, and shockingly, it wasn't because of what we just talked about. Since the start of the canceled podcast, Brooke has been talking about a guy named Joe. Joe is some guy that she has a thing with. They're always off and on. They're kind of like friends with benefits, but one person has stronger feelings than the other, and it always ends in hurt feelings. The stories that Brooke tells always seems like he treats her like complete shit. But for some reason, every week Brooke comes back with the same story about Joe over and over again. Now, obviously, this guy's real name isn't Joe. It's just an alias, so no one knows who she's talking about and then goes and harasses him. People have tried to guess before who Joe is, but so far, I don't think anyone's guess has been right. They never really give away too many personal details, so it's clear that Brooke does not want anyone to know. In last week's episode, Brooke said that Joe actually broke things off with her. He wanted to see other people, and Brooke sounded really upset.
It's a Joe update, you guys, and I know no one wants to hear about Joe.
But they do. They really do.
Well, it's like, why are you still talking to Joe? And it's like, I don't know, guys, but I'm not anymore because now he's talking to somebody new. And he told me last night in a very tasteful and respectful conversation, actually. But
Bit egregious.
I can't tell you, like, the physical reaction that my body had. Like, I literally I still feel it. Like, I just want to throw up.
This is actually the first time that Tana and Brooke have ever given away a few more details about Joe. Tana said that she likes his friends and she always sees Joe whenever she goes out, which means he must be a social media person. But this is where Tana had a major slip up. Tana recently started a side kind of like live podcast called Tana's Toxic Tips, partnered with Spotify. During last week's episode, apparently everyone was asking Tana who Joe was, and someone actually guessed who it was, and Tana had a reaction that pretty much confirmed that Joe was who that person said. The only thing is, there's literally no proof of this. It doesn't seem like anyone got any receipts, there's no screen recording, and it's been edited out of the re-upload. But the people who were on the live show heard, and Brooke was so mad. She tweeted, "I quit the canceled podcast. and Tana quote tweeted her, writing, "Me too, we're done, sorry, had a good run." Obviously, everyone was freaking out and spamming Brooke on TikTok, asking her why she quit and if she was actually being serious.
Hello. Okay, so I'm not quitting the podcast. I was quick to tweet because I am a very emotional girl. But really quick, I just want to talk about like boundaries when it comes to podcast stuff, because like there need to be some boundaries. Obviously, the whole point of the podcast is to tell like crazy stories and like give insight into our lives and stuff. And like I love doing that. I love oversharing. There's nothing that I feel like I don't want people to know about me. So I'll share anything when it comes to myself. But sometimes we have to change names because it's like they're not our stories to tell, or like other people are involved and like they might not want their personal like information aired out online, and you have to respect that. Every single time we tell a story, it's like people will go out of their way to figure out who we're talking about, and sometimes it's really not that big of a deal, but sometimes it is. Just know that if I'm changing somebody's name, I'm doing it because I want to, and like if I wanted you to know who that person was, like I would tell you. And it's one thing like to be a fan and like be genuinely curious and like go out of your way and figure out who somebody is and like just, you know, keep it up here. But messaging them like often, not only does it make me never want to tell a story on the podcast again, but it also makes every single person in my personal life like fearful of me. So don't do that.
But even though Brooke put out this TikTok, obviously upset that his name got out, people were still trying to guess who Joe was. We had guesses like Jeff Wittick, David Dobrik, and even Pauly D. Brooke then went on to tweet, "It should go without saying that if I change someone's name on the podcast, it's for a reason. I want to share, but please respect boundaries." So yeah, I still don't know who Joe is, and it sounds like most people don't either, so hopefully Tana's slip up doesn't affect anyone too much. Anyways guys, let me know what you think about everything down below, and I'll see you next time.